Some conversations change everything. What started as me trying to document workplace harassment turned into the recording that would expose a web of lies, manipulation, and corruption that reached the highest levels of our company. By the end of this story, 2 careers would be destroyed, justice would be served, and I would learn that sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply the truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne flutes clinked around the conference room as Marcus Hartwell raised his glass high, his silver watch catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Marketing Group's 20th floor headquarters in downtown Portland. The city sprawled below us, but all I could focus on was the sinking feeling in my stomach as I realized what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to announce our new creative director, Victoria Summers. His voice carried that self-satisfied tone I'd grown to recognize over the past 4 years working under him. The applause erupted around me, a cacophony of congratulations that felt like a physical assault on my ears. Victoria stood up gracefully from her seat beside Marcus, her perfectly styled auburn hair catching the light as she smiled that practiced smile I'd watched her perfect during her 3 months at our company. 3 months. I'd been at Sterling Marketing Group for 4 years, building campaigns that had won industry awards, bringing in clients worth millions in revenue, working weekends and holidays to prove my dedication to a company I thought valued merit over politics. Thank you so much, Marcus, Victoria began, her voice honeyed with false modesty. I'm so excited to bring fresh perspectives to our creative team and work alongside such talented individuals. Her eyes swept the room and landed on me for just a moment longer than necessary. Especially Natalie, who's been such a wonderful mentor during my transition here. Mentor. The word stuck in my throat like bitter medicine. I'd been training my replacement for 3 months without knowing it, sharing 4 years of hard-earned knowledge with someone who'd walked straight into the position I'd been promised since last year's performance review. I forced my hands to come together in what I hoped resembled applause, the sound hollow and mechanical. Around me, my colleagues continued their enthusiastic clapping, some casting sympathetic glances my way. Helen Rodriguez from accounting caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile that somehow made everything worse. The pity in her expression confirmed what I'd been trying to deny for weeks. Everyone had seen this coming except me. Marcus continued his speech, outlining Victoria's impressive credentials and vision for the creative department. Each word felt like another nail in the coffin of my career aspirations. Victoria brings exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need to stay competitive in today's market. Her background in digital strategy and her fresh approach to client relations make her the perfect fit for this role. Fresh approach. I'd heard Marcus use those exact words 6 months ago, when he'd told me the creative director position would be mine as soon as the current director retired. Just keep doing what you're doing, Natalie, he'd said then. Your experience with the Thompson Industries account proves you're ready for the next level. Thompson Industries. The account that had nearly killed me with stress but had ultimately brought in $12 million in revenue over 2 years. The account where I'd worked 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight to save a campaign that our previous creative director had completely mismanaged. The account that Marcus was now praising Victoria for her quote to managing, despite the fact that she'd only been assigned to it 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting in the same conference room where Marcus had called me in just last month to discuss my career trajectory. He'd sat across from me at the same polished mahogany table, his hands folded in that paternal way that had once made me feel valued and heard. Natalie, you've been incredibly valuable to this company, he'd said, his tone warm and encouraging. Your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. The creative director role is practically yours. I just need to handle some administrative details, maybe bring in someone junior to help transition some of your current responsibilities. Someone junior. Victoria had started the following Monday, introduced as a temporary consultant to help with overflow work. I'd welcomed her warmly, even volunteered to show her the ropes, thinking I was helping a young professional get her footing in a competitive industry. The bitter taste in my mouth now was the realization that I'd been grooming my replacement with the same enthusiasm I'd once reserved for advancing my own career. Victoria finished her acceptance speech to another round of applause, and people began mingling, forming small clusters of conversation around the conference room. I remained in my seat, watching the scene unfold with the detached fascination of someone observing a car accident in slow motion. Patricia Wong from HR approached Victoria with a stack of paperwork, congratulating her warmly. Kevin Park from IT was already discussing system access changes she'd need for her new role. The machinery of corporate transition was already in motion, smoothly accommodating the new hierarchy as if I'd never been in consideration for the position at all. "Natalie." Marcus's voice interrupted my brooding. He'd approached my chair with that same paternal expression, though now it felt more condescending than comforting. "Could I have a word with you? My office? Maybe 10 minutes?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain professional. The next 10 minutes crawled by as I watched my colleagues network with Victoria, discussing projects I'd initiated, campaigns I'd developed, client relationships I'd nurtured for years. She handled each conversation with practiced ease, as if she'd been preparing for this role far longer than the 3 months she'd been at the company. Marcus's office occupied a corner of the building with views of both the Willamette River and Mount Hood in the distance. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the scenery. Instead, I sat across from his imposing desk, noting how the power dynamic of the room had shifted now that I knew where I truly stood in his estimation. "I know today was difficult for you," he began, settling into his leather chair with the comfort of someone who'd never had to question his place in the hierarchy. "But I hope you understand that this decision was made with the company's best interests in mind." Best interests. I wondered if he actually believed that, or if corporate doublespeak had become so ingrained that he could no longer distinguish between self-serving decisions and genuine business strategy. "Marcus, 3 months ago you told me this position was mine. What changed?" I kept my voice level, professional, though inside I felt like screaming. He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture I'd noticed during our more difficult client meetings. Victoria brings a unique skill set that we felt was more aligned with our future direction. Her academic background in digital marketing, combined with her fresh perspective on industry trends, made her the stronger candidate. Academic background. Victoria had graduated 18 months ago with an MBA from a respectable but unremarkable program. I had 4 years of real-world experience managing multi-million-dollar accounts, plus a track record of successful campaigns that had literally kept this company profitable during the economic uncertainty of the past 2 years. And my experience with Thomson Industries, the Morrison campaign that won us 3 industry awards, the client relationships I've built that generate 60% of our annual revenue. Each question felt like pulling teeth, but I needed to understand the logic behind this decision. Marcus shifted in his chair again, his discomfort becoming more apparent. "Your contributions have been valuable, Natalie. Extremely valuable. That's why I'm hoping you'll consider staying on as senior campaign manager. We'll be restructuring some responsibilities, giving you more oversight of our mid-tier accounts." Mid-tier accounts. A lateral move disguised as an opportunity, managing smaller clients while Victoria handled the major relationships I'd spent years developing. The offer felt like being demoted while being told I should be grateful for the chance. "I need to think about it," I said, standing to leave. The truth was, I already knew my answer. I couldn't work under someone I'd trained, managing lesser accounts while watching her take credit for the foundation I'd built. But I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet, not while my emotions were still running so high. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Marcus stood as well, extending his hand in what I assumed was meant to be a gesture of professional respect. "I hope you'll see this as an opportunity to focus on what you do best while helping Victoria succeed in her new role."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Helping Victoria succeed. The phrase echoed in my mind as I shook his hand and walked out of his office. How many times in my career had I been asked to help someone else succeed, to mentor, to support, to facilitate other people's advancement, while my own career stagnated? The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of forced normalcy. I responded to emails, reviewed campaign proposals, attended a client call where I found myself explaining account history to Victoria, who would now be the primary contact for future interactions. Each task felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else perform the motions of my professional life while I observed from a distance. By 5 o'clock, most of the office had emptied out, but I remained at my desk, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. The Thomson Industries quarterly report was open in front of me, showing the steady growth in engagement and conversion rates that my strategies had achieved over the past 2 years. Numbers don't lie, but apparently they don't matter either when politics trump performance. Helen Rodriguez appeared at my desk with 2 cups of coffee, setting one down beside my keyboard before settling into the chair across from my desk. "Rough day," she said simply. "That's putting it mildly." I accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma that reminded me of the early morning strategy sessions I'd shared with Marcus, when I still believed my hard work was building towards something meaningful. "For what it's worth, everyone knows this was wrong," Helen said quietly, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "Victoria's nice enough, but she doesn't have your experience or your track record. People are talking. Talking doesn't change anything." I sipped my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest without really dispelling the cold disappointment that had settled there. Marcus made his choice. Helen leaned forward, lowering her voice even further. "Did you know Victoria and Marcus have been having dinner meetings? Kevin mentioned seeing them at Meridian twice last week, and that's not exactly a business lunch kind of place." Meridian was an upscale restaurant in Portland's Pearl District, known more for romantic dinners than professional meetings. The information sat uneasily in my stomach, adding another layer of complication to an already difficult situation. "Helen, I appreciate the information, but I don't want to get involved in office gossip." Even as I said it, I felt a nagging suspicion that there might be more to Victoria's rapid promotion than Marcus's stated reasons about fresh perspectives and academic credentials. "I'm just saying, maybe there are factors at play here that have nothing to do with qualifications." Helen finished her coffee and stood to leave. "And maybe those factors won't stay hidden forever." After Helen left, I sat alone in the gradually darkening office, watching the lights come on across Portland's downtown landscape. My reflection stared back at me from the window, and I barely recognized the defeated woman looking back. 4 years ago, I'd been excited about joining Sterling Marketing Group, convinced that hard work and results would speak for themselves in a merit-based environment. The woman in the window looked older, more tired, and significantly less optimistic about the corporate world's commitment to fairness. But she also looked determined, as if she were finally ready to stop accepting disappointment as an inevitable part of professional life. My phone buzzed with a text from David, my husband of 6 years. "How did the announcement go? Finally official?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "We need to talk tonight." The drive home through Portland's early evening traffic gave me time to process the day's events and consider my options. I could accept Marcus's offer and continue working at Sterling Marketing Group in a diminished capacity, helping Victoria succeed while managing smaller accounts. I could look for opportunities at other agencies, though at 34 I wasn't sure how many companies would value my experience over younger candidates with lower salary expectations. Or I could do something else entirely. Something that would force Marcus and the company to confront the real reasons behind Victoria's promotion and the true cost of prioritizing politics over performance. By the time I pulled into our driveway in the Hawthorne district, I had made my decision. I just wasn't sure yet how to execute it. David was in the kitchen when I walked through the front door, the smell of his famous pasta sauce filling our small house with warmth and normalcy. He took one look at my face and immediately turned off the stove, pulling out a chair at our kitchen table. "Sit, tell me everything." So I did. I told him about Victoria's promotion, about Marcus's explanation that felt more like rationalization, about the offer to stay on in a reduced role. David listened without interruption, his jaw tightening as I described the afternoon's events. 4 years, he said finally. 4 years of your life, and this is how they repay your loyalty. Maybe loyalty was my mistake. I accepted the glass of wine he offered, grateful for something to occupy my hands while we talked. Maybe I should have been more political, more strategic about managing relationships instead of just focusing on results. Or maybe you should have been working for people who actually value integrity and competence. David's anger on my behalf was touching, but it didn't change the reality of my situation. The job market isn't exactly friendly to people in their 30s who've been at one company for 4 years. Especially in marketing, where everyone wants fresh perspectives and digital natives. David reached across the table and took my hand. "You're incredibly talented, Natalie. Any company would be lucky to have you. Sterling's loss will be someone else's gain." I squeezed his hand, drawing comfort from his unwavering support even as doubt gnawed at my confidence. What if I told you I was considering something that might burn bridges? Something that could make it difficult to get references from Sterling? I'd ask what you had in mind. His tone was cautious but supportive. And I'd remind you that some bridges deserve to be burned. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Helen's comment about Victoria and Marcus's dinner meetings. If there was something inappropriate about Victoria's promotion, something beyond the professional justifications Marcus had offered, then maybe the situation wasn't as hopeless as it appeared. I thought about the upcoming company holiday party, scheduled for the following Friday at the Riverfront Conference Center. These parties had always been networking opportunities, chances to strengthen relationships with colleagues and clients in a more relaxed setting. But maybe this year's party could serve a different purpose entirely. By the time I fell asleep, I had the beginnings of a plan that would either vindicate my suspicions or prove that sometimes the most straightforward explanation is the correct one. Either way, I would finally have answers about why 4 years of dedication had counted for less than 3 months of whatever Victoria was offering Marcus. The next morning, I walked into Sterling Marketing Group with a new sense of purpose. I had work to do, relationships to observe, and a party to prepare for. If Marcus thought he could dismiss 4 years of my career with corporate buzzwords and false promises, he was about to learn that some people fight back. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon in that fight is simply the truth, captured in a recording that no one can deny or explain away. The stage was set. The players were in position. And I was finally ready to stop being the victim of other people's political games and start writing my own ending to this story. What I couldn't have known then was that the recording I would make at that party would expose more than just an inappropriate relationship. It would uncover a web of lies, fraud, and manipulation that reached the highest levels of Sterling Marketing Group and ultimately result in consequences that none of us saw coming. But that revelation was still a week away. For now, I had a party to prepare for and a plan to execute. The game was about to change, and this time, I intended to be the one controlling the rules. The week following Victoria's promotion announcement passed like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. Each day brought new revelations about the depth of my miscalculation regarding my standing at Sterling Marketing Group, and each interaction with Victoria and Marcus revealed layers of deception I hadn't anticipated. Tuesday morning arrived with an email that made my coffee taste like acid. Victoria had sent a company-wide message outlining her vision for the creative department, including structural changes that would fundamentally alter how we approached client relationships. The language was corporate-friendly and optimistic, but the underlying message was clear. Everything I'd built over 4 years was being dismantled in favor of her preferred methods. Moving forward, we'll be implementing a more collaborative approach to account management. Her email read, "Rather than having single points of contact for major clients, we'll utilize team-based strategies that leverage diverse perspectives and prevent over-reliance on individual relationships." Over-reliance on individual relationships. The Thompson Industries account had thrived precisely because I'd invested time in understanding their unique needs, their corporate culture, their decision-making processes. Robert Thompson himself had told Marcus on multiple occasions that he valued working with someone who understood his business intimately. Now, Victoria was essentially labeling that personalized service as a liability. I forwarded the email to David with a single comment. Translation: "She doesn't want me having direct access to the clients I've spent years cultivating." His response came back within minutes. Translation: She's threatened by your expertise and is trying to minimize your influence. Classic corporate power play. The morning team meeting confirmed my suspicions. Victoria had arranged the conference room with herself at the head of the table, a subtle but clear assertion of her new authority. Marcus sat to her right, nodding approvingly as she outlined changes to our project workflow that would require all client communications to be routed through her office. I want to ensure consistency in our messaging, she explained, her tone carefully modulated to sound collaborative rather than controlling. When clients receive information from multiple team members, sometimes details get lost or conflicting advice gets offered. This new system will prevent confusion and present a unified front. Kevin Park raised his hand tentatively. What about ongoing relationships? Some of our clients have been working directly with specific team members for years. Won't this disrupt those established connections? Victoria's smile remained fixed, but I caught a flash of irritation in her eyes. Change can be challenging initially, but our clients will appreciate the improved coordination. They'll have access to our entire team's expertise, rather than being limited to one person's perspective. Limited to one person's perspective. I bit my tongue to prevent myself from mentioning that my limited perspective had generated $12 million in revenue for the company over the past 2 years, while her diverse expertise consisted of 3 months of observing my methods. After the meeting, I lingered in the conference room, ostensibly reviewing my notes but actually observing the dynamics between Victoria and Marcus. They stood near the window discussing something in low voices, their body language suggesting a familiarity that extended beyond professional collaboration. Marcus's hand briefly touched her shoulder as he made a point, a gesture that lasted just long enough to confirm Helen's observations about their relationship. Natalie. Victoria's voice interrupted my thoughts. Marcus had left, and she was approaching the table where I sat. I was hoping we could chat about the transition process. I know this adjustment period might feel unsettling, but I want you to know how much I value your experience. I closed my notebook and looked at her directly. 3 months of working alongside her had revealed someone who was articulate and presentable, but whose understanding of our business remained superficial. Her MBA had provided her with theoretical frameworks and corporate vocabulary, but she lacked the practical experience that comes from managing real clients with real problems and real deadlines. I'm curious about your background with digital marketing strategy, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Your approach to the Morrison campaign last week was interesting. Where did you develop that methodology? A brief hesitation flickered across her features before she recovered. Graduate school provided a strong foundation in contemporary digital strategies. Professor Williams at Portland State emphasized innovative approaches to customer engagement metrics. Professor Williams. I made a mental note to research Portland State's marketing faculty later. Something about her answer felt rehearsed, as if she'd prepared for this type of questioning. The metrics you presented showed promising projections. I continued. Have you implemented similar strategies in previous roles? Another pause. Sterling is actually my first position in agency work. Before this, I was focusing on completing my education and developing my theoretical understanding of market dynamics. First position in agency work. Marcus had promoted someone with no practical experience to oversee a department managing multi-million-dollar accounts. The decision became more baffling with each revelation about Victoria's actual qualifications. Well, I'm sure you'll learn quickly, I said, gathering my materials. The Thomson Industries quarterly review is next week. They tend to ask very specific questions about campaign performance and ROI calculations. I've prepared a briefing document with historical context that might help you prepare. Actually, I was thinking we might handle that meeting together initially. Your institutional knowledge could be valuable during the transition period. There it was again. Transition period. Victoria needed me present because she couldn't handle the client meeting alone, but she couldn't admit that without undermining her authority. The situation was becoming increasingly surreal. That afternoon, I found myself working late again, not because I had excessive tasks, but because the office felt different during evening hours. The daytime energy of corporate productivity gave way to a quieter atmosphere, where conversations were more honest, and political facades relaxed slightly. Helen stopped by my desk around 6:30, settling into the chair across from me with the familiarity of someone who'd become an ally during uncertain times. Kevin mentioned something interesting today, she said, glancing around to ensure we had privacy. He was updating system access privileges for Victoria's new role, and he noticed some unusual activity on Marcus's calendar from the past few months. I looked up from my computer screen, curious despite my reluctance to engage in office speculation. Apparently, Victoria's been listed as attending executive meetings that occurred before she was officially hired, strategy sessions, budget reviews, client acquisition discussions, meetings that even you weren't included in, despite being the senior campaign manager. The information settled in my stomach like a cold weight. If Victoria had been participating in executive-level discussions before her official start date, it suggested a level of advanced planning that contradicted Marcus's claims about her being brought in to help with overflow work. How far back do these meetings go? I asked. According to Kevin, at least 6 weeks before she started, maybe longer. Helen leaned forward, lowering her voice. Natalie, what if this whole situation was orchestrated from the beginning? What if bringing you in, to mentor her, was just a way to extract your knowledge and methods before replacing you? The possibility was more disturbing than simple nepotism or favoritism. It suggested deliberate deception, a calculated plan to transfer my expertise to someone else while maintaining the pretense of normal business operations. That would mean Marcus lied to me for months about my promotion prospects. It would mean a lot more than that. Helen's expression was grim. It would mean they've been planning to push you out while using your work to establish Victoria's credibility with clients and upper management. After Helen left, I sat alone in the darkening office, staring at my computer screen without really processing the information displayed there. The Thompson Industries account files were open, showing 4 years of campaign development, strategy refinements, and relationship building. Every successful initiative, every problem solved, every innovation implemented, all of it documented and accessible to someone who could claim credit for the foundation I'd established. My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus, could you prepare a comprehensive briefing on the Thompson account for Victoria? Include historical performance data, current strategies, and your recommendations for future development. She'll need this for next week's client meeting. I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. Of course. I'll have it ready by Thursday. But as I typed the confirmation, another plan was forming in my mind. If Marcus and Victoria had been orchestrating this transition for months, using my expertise to prepare for my own replacement, then maybe it was time to gather some intelligence of my own. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and began what I privately called reconnaissance. I reviewed email patterns, calendar entries, and project timelines, looking for evidence of the coordination Helen had suggested. What I found was more disturbing than I'd expected. Victoria's access to company systems had been established 2 weeks before her official start date. Her email account showed correspondence with Marcus dating back nearly 2 months, including discussions about budget allocations and staffing changes that directly affected my role. Most damning was a document trail showing that my performance reviews and client relationship assessments had been shared with her before she'd even been introduced to the team. They'd been studying me like a specimen, analyzing my methods and relationships in preparation for a replacement strategy that had been months in the making. Every time I'd shared knowledge with Victoria, thinking I was mentoring a colleague, I'd actually been providing information to someone who was systematically preparing to take over my responsibilities. The lunch meeting I witnessed that Wednesday confirmed my worst suspicions. I'd gone to Meridian for a solo meal, needing time away from the office to process what I'd discovered. The restaurant's lunch crowd provided anonymity, and I'd chosen a corner table where I could eat quietly while planning my next moves. Marcus and Victoria entered 20 minutes after I'd been seated, requesting a table in the restaurant's more intimate back section. They were too far away for me to hear their conversation, but their body language told a story that professional colleagues rarely write. Victoria's hand rested on Marcus's arm as they reviewed documents spread across their table. His fingers briefly intertwined with hers as he made points about whatever they were discussing. Their interaction had the comfortable intimacy of people who'd moved far beyond workplace acquaintanceship. I photographed their table discreetly with my phone, though I wasn't sure what I intended to do with the evidence. The image showed Marcus leaning close to Victoria, their heads nearly touching as they examined what appeared to be financial documents. To any observer, they looked like a couple discussing personal matters rather than colleagues conducting business. The revelation about their relationship added another layer of complexity to the situation. Marcus wasn't just favoring Victoria because of her qualifications or potential. He was advancing the career of someone he was romantically involved with, using company resources and my expertise to establish her professional credibility. That evening, David found me at our kitchen table with my laptop open, surrounded by printed emails and document copies I'd accumulated during my investigation. "This looks serious," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "It's worse than I thought." I showed him the timeline I'd constructed, demonstrating how Victoria's integration into the company had been planned months in advance, while Marcus continued assuring me that the creative director position was mine. "This is fraud," David said after reviewing the evidence. "They used your work and knowledge to prepare your replacement while lying to you about promotion opportunities. That's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal." "Maybe, but proving it would require internal documents that I probably shouldn't have accessed. And even if I could prove deception, what's the remedy? They could claim business needs changed, or that Victoria simply emerged as a stronger candidate during the evaluation process." David studied the photographs I'd taken at Meridian. "What about their personal relationship?" "That has to violate some kind of company policy about supervisors dating subordinates." "Probably, but Marcus would just claim the relationship developed after her hiring. Without evidence of when it started, it's my word against theirs." "So what are you going to do?" I closed the laptop and gathered the scattered documents. "The company holiday party is tomorrow night. These kinds of events tend to loosen people's tongues, especially when alcohol is involved. Maybe I'll learn something that provides better insight into their plans. Be careful, Nat. These people have already demonstrated they're willing to lie and manipulate to get what they want. Don't underestimate what they might do if they feel threatened." That night, I lay awake thinking about David's warning. I'd spent 4 years believing that Sterling Marketing Group operated according to professional standards and ethical business practices. The discovery that my own supervisor had orchestrated an elaborate deception to replace me while maintaining the pretense of valuing my contributions had shattered those assumptions. But it had also clarified my options. I could accept the situation, continue working under Victoria while watching her receive credit for strategies I'd developed and relationships I'd nurtured. I could leave quietly, moving to another company with whatever references Marcus might provide while remaining silent about what I'd discovered. Or I could find a way to expose the truth about how Victoria had actually obtained her promotion and what Marcus's real motivations had been. The holiday party presented an opportunity to gather information that might not be available through normal channels. By Thursday evening, I decided on my approach. I would attend the party, observe interactions between Marcus and Victoria, and document anything that revealed the true nature of their relationship or their plans for the company. If alcohol loosened inhibitions enough, I might finally hear honest conversations about how my replacement had been orchestrated. I spent Friday preparing for what I privately thought of as my intelligence-gathering mission. I charged my phone completely, tested its recording capabilities, and planned my positioning at the party venue to maximize opportunities for observation. The Riverfront Conference Center had multiple spaces connected by open corridors, making it possible to move between areas without drawing attention. Victoria had sent an email to the creative team that morning, encouraging everyone to attend the party and celebrate the department's successful year. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was taking credit for achievements that had primarily occurred before her arrival, but I simply confirmed my attendance and continued preparing for the evening ahead. By 5 o'clock, I was ready to discover what Marcus and Victoria said to each other when they thought no one was listening. What I didn't anticipate was that their private conversation would reveal not just personal improprieties, but evidence of activities that could destroy both their careers and potentially land them in legal trouble. The stage was set for revelations that would exceed even my suspicions about the depth of their deception. The holiday party was about to become the venue for the most important recording of my professional life. The Riverfront Conference Center hummed with corporate celebration, as Sterling Marketing Group's annual holiday party reached full swing. The venue's floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Portland's twinkling skyline, while inside, conversations flowed as freely as the premium wine Marcus had insisted on serving. I'd arrived fashionably late, giving myself time to observe the social dynamics already established before making my presence known. Victoria commanded attention near the main bar, her emerald cocktail dress catching the light as she gestured animatedly while discussing what I assumed were her vision statements for the creative department. A small crowd of colleagues surrounded her, their expressions ranging from genuine interest to the polite attention that corporate hierarchy demands. Marcus hovered at the periphery of her circle, his pride evident in the way he watched her hold court. I positioned myself near the appetizer station, close enough to overhear conversations, but far enough away to avoid immediate social obligations. My phone was fully charged and discreetly accessible in my clutch purse, its recording app tested and ready. What I needed was an opportunity to capture Marcus and Victoria in unguarded conversation, something that revealed the true nature of their relationship and their plans for reshaping the department. "Natalie, you look stunning tonight." Patricia Wong from HR appeared beside me, balancing a plate of hors d'oeuvre with practiced corporate party efficiency. "How are you adjusting to all the recent changes?" The question carried layers of meaning. Patricia was skilled at extracting information through seemingly casual conversation, and her interest in my adjustment process suggested she'd heard rumors about my dissatisfaction with Victoria's promotion. "Change is always challenging initially," I replied, borrowing Victoria's own phrasing from earlier conversations. "But I'm learning to appreciate different perspectives on leadership." Patricia's smile sharpened slightly. "Victoria certainly brings energy to the role, though I imagine there's a learning curve when someone moves into executive responsibilities so quickly." Even HR had noticed the unusually rapid promotion timeline. I filed that observation away while maintaining my diplomatic expression. "Experience comes in many forms," I said carefully. "Some people learn through years of practice, others through intensive study and natural aptitude." "Indeed." Patricia's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by the natural aptitude explanation. "Well, I hope you'll consider staying with Sterling through this transition. Your institutional knowledge is invaluable, and losing experienced team members during leadership changes can be destabilizing for client relationships." After Patricia moved on to network with other attendees, I continued my observation mission. The party's open floor plan made it easy to move between conversation clusters while appearing to mingle naturally. I collected fragments of discussion about Victoria's background, Marcus's decision-making process, and speculation about future departmental changes. Kevin Park confirmed what I'd suspected about Victoria's technical knowledge. She asked me to explain our project management software yesterday. He mentioned during a conversation near the wine station. Basic functionality that any creative director should understand instinctively. I had to show her how to access client files and generate standard reports. Helen appeared at my elbow during this exchange, her expression knowing. "Steep learning curve for someone with extensive digital marketing experience," she murmured as Kevin moved away. "Everyone has different strengths," I replied diplomatically, though privately I was cataloging each revelation about Victoria's actual qualifications versus her stated credentials. The evening progressed with typical corporate party rhythms. Initial formality gave way to more relaxed interactions as alcohol consumption increased and hierarchical barriers temporarily lowered. I nursed a single glass of wine while maintaining alertness for the opportunity I was seeking. That opportunity presented itself around 9:30, when Marcus and Victoria stepped away from the main party area toward the venue's quieter conference spaces. I waited 60 seconds before following discreetly, my heart racing with anticipation and nervousness about what I might discover. The corridor leading to the smaller meeting rooms was dimly lit and mostly deserted. I could hear voices coming from the third room down the hall, the door slightly ajar in a way that suggested the occupants believed they had complete privacy. I approached carefully, positioning myself where I could hear clearly, while remaining hidden from view. "This is working better than we expected," Victoria's voice carried clearly through the gap. "The transition has been smoother because Natalie documented everything so thoroughly. Her client relationship notes are incredibly detailed." I told you she'd be useful during the knowledge transfer phase, Marcus replied. 4 years of relationship building and strategy development, all nicely organized for easy implementation. My breath caught. Knowledge transfer phase. They were openly discussing using my work to establish Victoria's credibility with clients. The Thomson Industries file alone is worth months of learning, Victoria continued. All their preferences, decision-making patterns, budget cycles. Robert Thomson will never know he's working with someone who's only been studying his account for 3 months. That's the beauty of comprehensive documentation. As long as you can reference the right details during conversations, clients assume you've been managing their accounts personally. I activated my phone's recording app, my hands trembling slightly as I held the device where it could capture their voices clearly. This conversation was already revealing deliberate deception about Victoria's role in client management. What about Natalie's role going forward? Victoria asked. She's been asking pointed questions about my background and experience. I'm not sure how much longer I can deflect without arousing more suspicion. Natalie's too professional to make waves publicly. She'll adapt to the new structure or find opportunities elsewhere. Either way, we've extracted the value we needed from her expertise. Extracted the value. They'd used me as an unwitting consultant to prepare Victoria for my replacement, then discarded my career prospects once my knowledge had been transferred. There's something else we need to discuss, Marcus continued, his tone becoming more serious. The Portland State verification issue. My pulse quickened. Portland State was where Victoria had claimed to study under Professor Williams. I handled that, Victoria said quickly. The transcripts match the story we constructed. As long as no one contacts the university directly for employment verification, there shouldn't be any problems. Transcripts match the story we constructed. Victoria had falsified her educational credentials, and Marcus was aware of the deception. What about the references from your supposed previous internships? Marcus pressed. Those are solid. My cousin runs the consulting firm I listed, and she'll confirm whatever employment history we discussed. The dates align with my graduate school timeline, so it looks like normal student work experience. My recording app was capturing everything: admission of credential falsification, fabricated work history, and conspiracy to deceive both the company and clients about Victoria's qualifications. This was far worse than simple nepotism or favoritism. This was fraud. Sometimes I wonder if we're being too clever about this whole arrangement, Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty I'd never heard before. Marcus, we discussed this thoroughly. You need someone in creative leadership who shares your vision for the company's future. Someone you can trust completely to implement strategies without questioning your decisions. Someone who won't challenge me the way Natalie did during budget meetings, he replied. Her constant questions about resource allocation and ROI projections were becoming problematic. My questions about ROI projections were problematic because they'd revealed that several of Marcus's pet projects weren't generating adequate returns. I'd been doing my job by analyzing campaign effectiveness, but apparently my competence had threatened his authority. The board loves seeing fresh leadership in key positions, Victoria continued. Young talent with innovative approaches. They don't need to know that my innovations come from studying Natalie's methods and presenting them as original thinking. Presenting my methods as original thinking. Every strategy I'd developed, every solution I'd crafted for difficult clients, every process improvement I'd implemented was being repackaged as Victoria's creative vision. What about long-term sustainability? Marcus asked. Eventually, you'll need to develop genuine expertise beyond what we've borrowed from Natalie's files. By then, I'll have enough practical experience to build on the foundation we've established. The clients will be used to working with me, and I'll have learned their needs through direct interaction. No one will question how I acquired the initial knowledge. Their conversation was interrupted by footsteps in the corridor. I quickly moved away from the door, slipping into the ladies' restroom just as Helen rounded the corner. There you are, she said, when I emerged, a few minutes later. I've been looking for you. Patricia mentioned something interesting about Victoria's background check. My heart was still racing from what I'd recorded, but I tried to focus on Helen's information. Apparently, HR's routine verification process hit some snags. Portland State has no record of a Professor Williams in their marketing department, and the consulting firm Victoria, listed as previous experience, seems to exist only as a website and phone number. So Patricia Wong had been conducting her own investigation into Victoria's credentials. HR had discovered discrepancies that aligned perfectly with what I'd just recorded. What did Patricia plan to do with that information? I asked. She's required to complete the verification process before finalizing Victoria's permanent employment status. If the credentials can't be confirmed, the company could face legal liability for fraudulent hiring practices. Legal liability. The recording in my phone contained evidence of exactly the kind of fraudulent practices that could expose Sterling Marketing Group to serious legal consequences. We returned to the main party area, where the celebration was winding down. Victoria and Marcus had rejoined the group, their public personas restored, as if the private conversation had never occurred. Victoria was describing her excitement about upcoming client presentations, while Marcus nodded approvingly at her enthusiasm for challenges that I knew she was completely unprepared to handle. I watched them perform their professional relationship charade while my phone contained proof of their actual dynamic, a conspiracy to defraud the company and clients through falsified credentials and stolen intellectual property. The weight of that knowledge felt simultaneously empowering and overwhelming. The drive home through Portland's quiet streets gave me time to process what I'd discovered. The recording was clear and comprehensive, capturing admissions of credential falsification, work history fabrication, conspiracy to deceive clients, and acknowledgement that my expertise had been systematically extracted and repackaged as Victoria's original thinking. David was waiting in the kitchen when I arrived, his expression expectant. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. I set my purse on the counter and looked at him seriously. I recorded something that could end both their careers and potentially result in criminal charges. His eyebrows raised. "That serious?" I played portions of the recording, watching David's expression shift from curiosity to shock to anger as he heard Marcus and Victoria openly discussing their fraudulent scheme. "This is incredible," he said when the playback ended. "They're admitting to fraud, conspiracy, theft of intellectual property. Natalie, this recording could destroy them." I know. The magnitude of what I'd captured was still sinking in. The question is what I do with it. "What do you mean?" "You take this to HR, to the board of directors, to law enforcement if necessary. These people committed serious crimes." I sat across from David at our kitchen table, the phone between us like evidence in a criminal case. If I expose this, Sterling Marketing Group faces a massive scandal. Fraudulent hiring, deceptive client management, potential lawsuits from clients who were misled about their account management. A lot of innocent people could lose their jobs. And if you don't expose it, Marcus and Victoria get away with destroying your career through criminal fraud. They'll continue deceiving clients and potentially commit more fraud in the future. The ethical implications were complex. Exposing the truth would vindicate my suspicions and potentially restore my career prospects, but it would also devastate a company where many good people worked. Remaining silent would allow criminals to escape consequences while they continued building careers on stolen expertise and falsified credentials. "There's another consideration," I said slowly. "If I expose this immediately, Marcus and Victoria might claim I recorded them illegally or took the information out of context. They could argue that their conversation was hypothetical or exaggerated. Then what do you suggest?" "I think I need to gather more evidence. Document their ongoing deception, maybe get Patricia Wong's verification findings, build an airtight case that can't be dismissed or explained away." David considered this approach. "How long would that take?" "A few weeks, maybe a month. Long enough to establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that goes beyond a single recorded conversation. And meanwhile, you continue working under Victoria, watching her take credit for your expertise while knowing she's completely unqualified for her position. It would be temporary, and it would ensure that when I do reveal the truth, the consequences are proportional to the crimes they've committed." That night, I lay awake thinking about the recording and planning my next moves. I had evidence of serious fraud, but I also had an opportunity to ensure that justice was served comprehensively rather than hastily. Marcus and Victoria had spent months orchestrating my professional downfall. They deserve to experience the full consequences of their criminal behavior. The recording was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I would document every instance of Victoria presenting my work as her own, every client interaction where she relied on my documented expertise, every moment when her lack of genuine qualifications became apparent to colleagues and clients. By the time I was ready to reveal the truth, there would be no doubt about the extent of their fraud or the damage they'd caused to both the company and my career. The recording from the holiday party had given me the weapon I needed to fight back. Now I just had to use it strategically to ensure that justice was both swift and complete. What Marcus and Victoria didn't realize was that their private conversation had been the beginning of their downfall. The careful deception they'd constructed over months would crumble in a matter of weeks, and this time, the consequences would be permanent and public. The game had changed completely. Instead of being the victim of their manipulation, I was now the person who held their careers in my hands. The only question was how and when to use that power most effectively. Monday morning arrived with an email from Victoria that made my newfound knowledge feel like carrying dynamite in my pocket. She was requesting a comprehensive handover of all client files, marketing strategies, and relationship management protocols within 48 hours. The timing wasn't coincidental. She needed to cement her position quickly, before anyone could scrutinize her credentials too closely. I sat in my office, staring at the email while the recording from Friday night played silently in my mind. Victoria's innocent request for documentation took on sinister implications when I knew she intended to present my 4 years of strategic development as evidence of her own capabilities. "Natalie, do you have a moment?" Patricia Wong appeared in my doorway, her expression more serious than I'd seen during casual party conversation. "I'd like to discuss some administrative matters regarding departmental changes." I gestured toward the chair across from my desk, wondering if Patricia's visit connected to her background verification concerns Helen had mentioned. "I'll be direct," Patricia began, settling into the chair with the deliberate movements of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. "My verification process for Victoria's employment has encountered some inconsistencies that require clarification." My pulse quickened, but I maintained a neutral expression. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Educational credentials that can't be confirmed through standard channels. Employment history that lacks verifiable documentation. References that seem unusually accommodating without providing specific details about her work performance." Patricia was describing exactly what I'd heard Victoria and Marcus discuss during their private conversation. The fabricated transcripts, the Cousins consulting firm, the carefully constructed timeline designed to hide the absence of legitimate experience. "That sounds concerning from a liability perspective," I replied carefully. "It is. Sterling Marketing Group has policies requiring thorough background verification for executive positions. Incomplete verification puts the company at risk for negligent hiring claims, especially if the employee lacks stated qualifications." I leaned forward slightly. "What happens if the verification can't be completed satisfactorily?" "Employment would be terminated during the probationary period. Additionally, any contracts or commitments made based on false credentials could expose us to legal action from clients who were misled about their account management." Legal action from clients. The Thompson Industries account alone represented enough revenue to justify serious litigation if they discovered their strategic planning had been handled by someone with fabricated qualifications. "Has Marcus been informed about these verification issues?" Patricia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've submitted preliminary findings to executive leadership. The response has been resistant to standard protocols." Resistant to standard protocols. Marcus was protecting Victoria by circumventing normal employment verification procedures. "I see." I kept my tone professionally neutral while processing the implications. "Is there anything specific you need from me regarding this matter?" "Actually, yes. As Victoria's primary mentor during her integration, your assessment of her capabilities could provide valuable context for our evaluation process." The irony was overwhelming. Patricia was asking me to document Victoria's incompetence, while I possessed recorded evidence of her fraudulent credentials and conspiracy with Marcus to deceive the company. I'd be happy to provide a comprehensive assessment, I said. When do you need this evaluation completed? By the end of this week. I'm scheduling a review meeting with senior management to discuss Victoria's permanent employment status. After Patricia left, I sat contemplating the convergence of circumstances. HR was conducting an investigation that would likely expose Victoria's fraud, while I possessed recorded evidence that proved both her deception and Marcus's complicity. The question was whether to allow the corporate process to unfold naturally or accelerate the timeline by revealing what I'd discovered. That afternoon brought a client meeting that crystallized my decision. Victoria had requested my presence during a Thomson Industries quarterly review, claiming she wanted to ensure continuity during the transition process. What actually occurred was a masterclass in incompetence masked by stolen expertise. Robert Thompson, a man I'd worked with for 2 years developing innovative digital marketing strategies, greeted Victoria with the courtesy reserved for new team members, but looked to me for substantive discussion about campaign performance and future planning. Victoria, I understand you'll be taking over account management, Thompson began diplomatically. Could you walk me through your assessment of our current positioning and recommendations for next quarter's initiatives? Victoria consulted notes I recognized as direct excerpts from my strategy documents. Based on comprehensive analysis of your market performance, I believe we should continue leveraging the multi-channel approach that's proven effective for your demographic targets. Multi-channel approach. She was regurgitating my strategic framework without understanding the underlying methodology or the specific customizations I'd developed for Thomson Industries' unique requirements. Thompson's eyebrows raised slightly. Could you elaborate on the demographic segmentation rationale? The decision to prioritize the 25 to 44 age bracket was based on some counterintuitive data analysis that initially surprised our internal team. I watched Victoria's confidence waver as she realized Thompson was asking about the analytical foundation for strategic decisions she'd inherited but hadn't developed. The segmentation approach reflects current industry best practices for technology adoption patterns, she replied, falling back on generic marketing terminology. Thompson looked confused. But our product targets enterprise decision-makers who are typically older than that demographic. The strategy we developed specifically challenged conventional wisdom about age-based targeting in B2B technology sales. Victoria glanced at me desperately. The strategy Thompson referenced had emerged from 6 months of data analysis and customer behavior research I'd conducted personally. She had no understanding of why we'd made unconventional demographic choices, or how those decisions had generated exceptional results. Perhaps Natalie could provide additional context about the analytical framework, Victoria suggested, essentially admitting she couldn't explain the strategy she was supposed to be managing. I provided Thompson with the detailed explanation he expected, walking through the research methodology and data insights that had informed our targeting decisions. His relief was visible, as he engaged with someone who understood both the strategy and its foundations. After the meeting, Thompson requested a private word with me in the hallway outside the conference room. Natalie, I need to ask directly. Is Victoria actually managing our account, or are you continuing to handle strategic decisions? The question forced me to confront the ethical implications of maintaining professional courtesy while clients were being deceived about their account management. Victoria is the designated creative director for your account, I replied carefully. That's not what I asked. Thompson's tone sharpened with the directness of someone accustomed to making important business decisions. I've worked with you for 2 years. I understand your analytical approach and trust your strategic thinking. What I just witnessed was someone reading from your playbook without comprehending the content. Transitions can be challenging initially, I offered diplomatically. Natalie, Thomson Industries pays Sterling Marketing Group substantial fees based on expectation of expert strategic guidance. If we're not receiving that level of service, we need to reconsider our relationship with your company. The threat was politely stated but unmistakable. Thomson Industries would terminate their contract if they couldn't trust their account management quality. Victoria's incompetence was jeopardizing the company's most valuable client relationship. That evening, I found myself at a crossroads that extended beyond personal vindication. The recording I possessed could expose Victoria and Marcus's fraud, But the Thomson Industries meeting had demonstrated that their deception was actively harming the company's ability to serve clients effectively. David found me in our home office, staring at my laptop screen where I'd been drafting multiple versions of letters to Patricia Wong, the board of directors and legal authorities. Each version contained different levels of detail about what I'd discovered and recorded. "Second thoughts about exposing them?" he asked, settling into the chair beside my desk. "Not second thoughts exactly. But I'm realizing this situation is more complex than personal revenge against people who wronged me." I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing the drafted communications. "If I reveal everything immediately, it resolves my situation but potentially destroys Sterling Marketing Group's reputation and costs a lot of innocent people their jobs. And if you don't reveal it, Victoria continues deceiving clients while Marcus protects her through abuse of executive authority. There might be a middle path," I said slowly. "Patricia's investigation is already uncovering problems with Victoria's credentials. If I provide strategic information that helps HR build an airtight case, Victoria gets terminated through normal corporate processes rather than explosive scandal." David considered this approach. "What about Marcus? He's equally culpable for the fraud and conspiracy. Marcus's downfall will follow naturally once Victoria's deception is exposed. Executive leadership that knowingly hired fraudulent employees tends to face serious consequences." Over the next 3 days, I executed a carefully planned strategy that provided Patricia Wong with exactly the information she needed to complete her investigation while maintaining plausible deniability about how I'd acquired certain insights. I documented every instance where Victoria had presented my work as her original thinking, complete with timestamps and email records showing when I'd developed specific strategies versus when she'd claimed credit for them. I compiled examples of her inability to explain methodologies she supposedly created, including the Thomson Industries meeting where she couldn't justify her own stated strategic decisions. Most importantly, I provided Patricia with specific questions to ask Victoria about her educational and employment background, questions that would expose inconsistencies in her fabricated history without revealing that I'd overheard her admission of fraud. "Ask her about Professor Williams's current research focus," I suggested during a private meeting with Patricia. "Graduate students typically stay informed about their professors' ongoing academic work. Ask about specific projects she managed during her consulting internship. Request deliverable examples or client testimonials that demonstrate her claimed expertise. Verify her graduate school timeline against Portland State's academic calendar. Make sure the courses she claims to have taken were actually offered during the semesters she attended." Patricia listened to these suggestions with the keen attention of someone who understood their investigative value. "These are very specific verification points," she observed. "Is there something particular that prompted these concerns?" Victoria's performance during client meetings has raised questions about whether her background aligns with her stated qualifications. I replied honestly. I thought more thorough verification might clarify any discrepancies. By Friday afternoon, Patricia's enhanced verification process had uncovered exactly what I'd expected. Portland State confirmed they had no Professor Williams in their marketing department. The consulting firm Victoria claimed for internship experience existed only as a phone number that forwarded to voicemail. Her academic transcript contained courses that hadn't been offered during the dates she claimed to have attended. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Victoria had systematically falsified her credentials, and Marcus had hired her despite knowing about the deception. Patricia scheduled an emergency meeting with the executive board for Monday morning. The agenda listed Victoria's employment status as requiring immediate review due to verification irregularities that could expose the company to legal liability. That weekend, I experienced a strange mixture of anticipation and melancholy. Justice was approaching, but it would arrive through corporate mechanisms that felt antiseptic compared to the personal betrayal I'd experienced. Victoria would be terminated for fraud, Marcus would face investigation for negligent hiring, and I would be vindicated through systematic exposure of their deception. But I would also be leaving Sterling Marketing Group. The environment had become too toxic for me to remain, regardless of how the investigation concluded. I'd already begun networking with contacts at other agencies, including James Mitchell at Pinnacle Creative Solutions, who'd expressed interest in my client management experience during a recent industry conference. Sunday evening, as Portland's skyline glittered beyond our living room windows, David and I discussed the week ahead. and what would likely be the conclusion of my time at Sterling Marketing Group. Any regrets about how you handled this situation? He asked. I considered the question carefully. I regret that it took so long for me to recognize what was happening. I regret that my trust in Marcus blinded me to obvious warning signs, but I don't regret gathering evidence or ensuring that the truth came out through appropriate channels. What about the recording? Do you plan to reveal that you have direct evidence of their conspiracy? Only if necessary. Patricia's investigation should provide sufficient grounds for termination and potential legal action. The recording remains insurance in case they try to claim innocence or shift blame onto others. Monday morning would bring the executive board meeting that would likely end Victoria's fraudulent career and expose Marcus's complicity in hiring deception. The validation I'd sought was arriving through systematic exposure of their crimes rather than personal confrontation. It wasn't the dramatic revelation I might have imagined, but it was thorough, irrefutable, and would result in permanent consequences for people who'd built their success on lies and stolen expertise. Sometimes justice arrives quietly, through careful documentation and professional investigation rather than explosive accusations. The game was nearly over, and this time, competence and integrity were positioned to triumph over fraud and manipulation. Victoria's house of cards was about to collapse, and Marcus's reputation would crumble alongside it. All that remained was watching the corporate machinery deliver consequences that fit the magnitude of their deception. Monday morning brought the kind of electric tension that precedes corporate earthquakes. I arrived at Sterling Marketing Group to find Patricia Wong already stationed outside the executive conference room. Her briefcase thick with documentation and her expression carrying the gravity of someone about to detonate a professional scandal. The executive board meeting had been scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp, with attendance required from all department heads, senior management, and what the agenda euphemistically called, quote, affected personnel. Victoria sat in the reception area outside the conference room, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy as she checked her phone repeatedly. Marcus paced near the elevators, his silver hair less perfectly styled than usual, and his customary authoritative demeanor showing cracks of anxiety. Helen appeared beside my desk with coffee and information. Security updated all the computer access codes this weekend, she whispered. Kevin says they're preparing for immediate termination procedures. Whatever Patricia discovered during her investigation, it's serious enough to warrant legal precautions. I accepted the coffee gratefully while processing the implications. Enhanced security measures suggested the company was preparing for potential data theft or sabotage from terminated employees, standard protocol when fraud or misconduct was suspected. At 8:45, Patricia appeared at my desk with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Natalie, could you join us for the meeting? Your insights regarding departmental operations may be valuable for our discussion. The executive conference room felt different from the celebratory space where Victoria's promotion had been announced just weeks earlier. Today, the polished mahogany table was arranged for interrogation rather than celebration, with Patricia's documentation spread across one end and recording equipment positioned for official proceedings. Board members filed in with expressions ranging from curious to grave. Chairman William Foster took his position at the head of the table, his weathered face betraying nothing about what he'd already been briefed regarding the meeting's purpose. We're here to address serious concerns regarding recent hiring practices and credential verification. Foster began without preamble. Patricia, please present your findings. What followed was a masterclass in systematic evidence presentation. Patricia had constructed an airtight case that methodically dismantled every aspect of Victoria's fabricated background. Portland State University's written confirmation that no Professor Williams had ever taught in their marketing department. The consulting firm that existed only as a forwarding number to an unmonitored voicemail system. Academic transcripts that listed courses never offered during Victoria's supposed enrollment periods. Additionally, Patricia continued, consulting her notes with professional precision. We've documented numerous instances where Ms. Summers has presented strategic methodologies and client relationship insights that she could not have developed during her brief tenure with Sterling Marketing Group. She produced email chains showing Victoria claiming credit for campaigns conceived and implemented before her arrival. Client meeting notes where Victoria had presented analytical frameworks she was subsequently unable to explain when questioned about underlying methodologies. Victoria's face had progressed from pale to ashen as each piece of evidence was presented. Marcus maintained his composure better, but I could see his jaw muscles tightening as the extent of the investigation became clear. "Ms. Summers," Foster addressed Victoria directly, "do you have responses to these findings?" Victoria glanced desperately at Marcus before answering. "There may have been miscommunications during the hiring process. Sometimes academic records contain errors, and university systems don't always reflect complete information accurately. University systems that show no record of your attendance? Academic advisors who've never heard your name? Professors who don't exist?" Patricia's tone remained professionally neutral, but her questions were surgical in their precision. "I can provide additional documentation," Victoria stammered. "Sometimes transcript requests require special processing, and my academic records might need verification through different channels." Foster's expression suggested he'd heard enough evasions. "Mr. Hartwell, as the executive who authorized this hiring decision, what due diligence did you perform regarding Ms. Summers's qualifications?" The question struck at the heart of Marcus's complicity. He'd hired Victoria despite knowing her credentials were fabricated, and now faced the choice between admitting foreknowledge of fraud or claiming incompetence in executive decision-making. Victoria's interview process demonstrated strong theoretical knowledge and innovative thinking. Marcus replied carefully. Her academic background seemed solid, and her strategic insights during our discussions were impressive. Strategic insights that, according to our investigation, appear to have been derived from existing company documents and methodologies developed by other team members. Patricia interjected smoothly. The trap was closing systematically. Every explanation Marcus offered only highlighted either his incompetence or his complicity in the deception. "Perhaps we should address the broader implications," Foster continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Sterling Marketing Group has contractual obligations to clients that depend on represented expertise and qualifications of account management personnel. Fraudulent credentials create legal liability for misrepresentation and breach of contract." Legal liability. The phrase hung in the air like a death sentence for both Victoria and Marcus's careers. Additionally, if executive leadership was aware of credential discrepancies and proceeded with employment anyway, that constitutes willful negligence that could expose the company to criminal fraud charges. Criminal fraud charges. Foster was making it clear that this situation extended far beyond employment termination into potential criminal prosecution. Victoria broke first. "I may have embellished some aspects of my background," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Quote, "The competitive job market requires presenting yourself in the best possible light, and sometimes that means emphasizing potential over-documented experience. Embellished some aspects." Even under direct confrontation, she was minimizing the extent of her deception. Foster's expression hardened. "Ms. Summers, according to our investigation, you fabricated your entire academic record, created fictional employment history, and presented stolen intellectual property as original work. This isn't embellishment, this is systematic fraud." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the recording equipment. Victoria stared at the table, her hands trembling slightly as the full weight of her exposure settled in. "Mr. Hartwell," Foster continued, turning his attention to Marcus, "were you aware of any discrepancies in Miss Summers's credentials before authorizing her employment?" The question was a prosecutorial masterpiece. Answering yes meant admitting complicity and fraud. Answering no meant claiming incompetence that violated fiduciary duties to the company and its clients. Marcus chose a third option. "I may have been overly impressed by Victoria's enthusiasm and potential rather than focusing sufficiently on documented qualifications." May have been overly impressed. He was attempting to characterize criminal conspiracy as poor judgment. Patricia produced another document from her briefcase. "We also discovered unusual patterns in system access and meeting attendance records." Ms. Summers appears to have been granted company resources and included in executive discussions before her official employment began. The pre-employment access records I'd suspected were now part of the official investigation. Patricia had uncovered the timeline that proved advanced coordination between Marcus and Victoria. These access patterns suggest a level of advanced planning inconsistent with normal hiring processes. Patricia continued methodically. Combined with the credential falsification, it indicates deliberate conspiracy to defraud the company and its clients. Deliberate conspiracy. The phrase captured exactly what I'd recorded during their private conversation, though Patricia had reached the same conclusion through legitimate investigative channels. Foster consulted with other board members in whispered conference before delivering the inevitable verdict. Ms. Summers, your employment with Sterling Marketing Group is terminated immediately for cause, including fraudulent representation of qualifications and theft of intellectual property. Mr. Hartwell, you are suspended pending full investigation of your role in these irregularities. Victoria's termination was expected, but Marcus's suspension indicated the board understood the depth of his complicity. Neither would survive this scandal professionally. Additionally, Foster continued, we are referring this matter to appropriate law enforcement agencies for investigation of potential criminal fraud. Both of you should consider retaining legal counsel. Legal counsel. The corporate euphemism for prepare for prosecution. Security personnel appeared at the conference room doors, ready to escort Victoria and Marcus from the building according to standard termination protocols for cause. Victoria gathered her belongings with shaking hands while Marcus maintained his dignified facade despite the professional devastation he was experiencing. As they prepared to leave, Victoria turned toward me with an expression combining desperation and accusation. Natalie, you know I was just trying to prove myself. You know I never meant to hurt anyone. The statement was simultaneously an admission and an attempt to elicit sympathy. After weeks of systematic deception, she was appealing to the professional relationship she'd exploited for her own advancement. I hope you find opportunities that match your actual qualifications, I replied diplomatically. After Victoria and Marcus left under security escort, Foster addressed the remaining staff. We'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all client accounts that were affected by this situation. Natalie, given your extensive knowledge of the affected relationships, would you be willing to serve as interim creative director while we manage this transition? Interim creative director. The position I'd been promised months ago was finally being offered, though under circumstances I'd never anticipated. I appreciate the opportunity, I replied carefully. However, I think Sterling Marketing Group needs leadership that can start fresh without the complications of recent events. I'd be happy to assist with client transition and knowledge transfer, but I believe my future lies elsewhere. The decision surprised even me as I spoke it aloud. For months, I'd wanted vindication and restoration to my rightful career trajectory. Now that justice had been served and the position was available, I realized I no longer wanted to remain at a company where such systematic deception had been possible. Foster nodded respectfully. I understand your perspective. Would you consider staying long enough to ensure smooth client transitions? Your expertise would be invaluable during this stabilization period. Absolutely. I'll remain as long as necessary to protect client relationships and ensure continuity. The meeting concluded with logistics discussions about managing the crisis and communicating with clients about leadership changes. Patricia approached me privately as others filed out of the conference room. Your insights were instrumental in building this case, she said quietly. The specific areas you suggested we investigate proved to be exactly where the most serious violations occurred. I'm glad the truth came out through proper channels, I replied honestly. There may be follow-up questions if criminal charges are filed. Both Victoria and Marcus are likely to face serious legal consequences, and your testimony about their deception could be valuable for prosecution. The prospect of testifying in criminal proceedings felt surreal, but it was the logical conclusion of the fraud they'd committed. That afternoon, I began the process of transitioning client relationships back to legitimate management. Robert Thompson was my first call, and his relief was audible when I explained the situation. I knew something wasn't right, he said immediately. Victoria couldn't explain strategies she supposedly developed, and her responses to our questions were clearly scripted rather than analytical. The board has asked me to resume direct management of your account while we identify permanent leadership, I explained. Natalie, I need to be frank. Thomson Industries was considering terminating our contract with Sterling if the service quality didn't improve immediately. Your expertise and understanding of our business has been the primary value in this relationship. Other client calls yielded similar feedback. Victoria's incompetence had been obvious to the people whose businesses depended on competent strategic guidance. My restoration to client management wasn't just organizational convenience. It was essential for preserving the relationships that kept Sterling Marketing Group viable. Over the following days, news of the scandal spread through Portland's marketing community with the speed of professional gossip. Victoria's fabricated credentials and Marcus's complicity became cautionary tales about the dangers of hiring based on personal relationships rather than verified qualifications. The story also reached James Mitchell at Pinnacle Creative Solutions, who called me directly with an opportunity that exceeded anything Sterling Marketing Group could offer. We've been following the situation at Sterling, James began diplomatically. Without commenting on their internal affairs, we're impressed by how professionally you've handled client relationships during challenging circumstances. He outlined a position as Senior Strategic Director that would give me authority over major account management plus equity participation in company growth. The salary represented a 40% increase over my Sterling compensation, and the role included autonomy to build strategic methodologies without political interference. We believe in promoting based on demonstrated results rather than academic credentials or personal connections, James continued. Your track record with complex client relationships speaks for itself. The offer was everything I'd wanted from Sterling Marketing Group, but had been denied due to office politics and fraud. More importantly, it came from a company that had observed my handling of the scandal and chosen to pursue me based on professional competence rather than personal relationships. I accepted James's offer that afternoon, providing Sterling with 4 weeks' notice to complete client transitions and knowledge transfer. My departure would be professional and thorough, leaving no loose ends that could harm innocent colleagues. The criminal investigation proceeded with predictable efficiency. Victoria was charged with multiple counts of fraud, including falsifying employment documents and theft of intellectual property. Marcus faced charges related to conspiracy and breach of fiduciary duty. Both retained expensive legal counsel, but the evidence Patricia had compiled was overwhelming and irrefutable. During one of the investigative interviews, prosecutors asked whether I possessed additional evidence beyond what HR had uncovered. I considered mentioning the recording from the holiday party but decided it was unnecessary. Patricia's systematic investigation had provided sufficient evidence for conviction, and the recording would remain my private vindication rather than public testimony. 6 months later, Victoria pleaded guilty to fraud charges and received 18 months probation plus restitution payments to Sterling Marketing Group. Marcus was convicted of conspiracy and breach of fiduciary duty, resulting in criminal fines and permanent prohibition from executive positions in publicly held companies. Both convictions became public record, effectively ending their careers in marketing and serving as warnings to other professionals who might consider similar deception. Meanwhile, my position at Pinnacle Creative Solutions exceeded every expectation I'd harbored about career advancement. The autonomy to develop strategies without political interference, combined with leadership that valued expertise over personal relationships, created an environment where my capabilities could flourish completely. Within 6 months, my strategic initiatives had generated enough new business to justify expanding my department by 3 additional positions. The equity participation meant that my success directly contributed to personal wealth building, rather than solely benefiting executives who'd never contributed to the actual work. Most satisfying was the respect my opinions carried during executive strategy meetings. When I recommended approaches or raised concerns, leadership listened because my track record demonstrated competence rather than dismissed my input because of political considerations. David observed the transformation in my professional satisfaction during dinner conversations that no longer revolved around workplace frustrations and career disappointments. "You seem like a different person," he commented one evening as we walked through our Hawthorne neighborhood. "More confident, more optimistic about your future. I feel like I'm finally working somewhere that values what I actually contribute, I replied. It's remarkable how much energy you recover when you're not constantly fighting for basic professional respect. The contrast with my sterling experience was profound. Instead of hoping my dedication would eventually be recognized, I was working in an environment where recognition was immediate and advancement was based on measurable results. 1 year after the scandal broke, I received an unexpected visitor at Pinnacle Creative Solutions. Robert Thompson appeared in our lobby requesting a meeting to discuss expanding his company's marketing relationship with us. Thompson Industries has been extremely satisfied with our service quality since making the transition, he explained during our conference room discussion. We'd like to explore additional strategic initiatives that could benefit from your analytical approach. The expanded contract represented Thompson's complete confidence in my capabilities, plus validation that the client relationships I'd nurtured were personal assets that transcended company affiliations. I appreciate Thompson Industries' continued trust, I replied. What specific areas are you considering for expanded marketing support? Product launch campaigns for our new software division, plus international market entry strategies for European expansion. Frankly, we want your strategic guidance on initiatives that could determine our company's growth trajectory for the next 5 years. Strategic guidance on 5-year growth trajectory. Thompson was offering me the opportunity to influence his company's long-term success. The kind of professional responsibility that Marcus had claimed I wasn't ready to handle. The meeting concluded with preliminary agreements for expanded services worth more than double the original Thompson Industries account value. My strategic relationship with the client had not only survived the sterling scandal, but had grown into something significantly more valuable. Walking back to my office after Thompson left, I reflected on the journey from professional disappointment to career transformation. The recording from Sterling's holiday party remains stored on my phone, a private reminder of how dramatically circumstances can change when truth replaces deception. But the recording was no longer necessary for validation or vindication. My current success at Pinnacle Creative Solutions provided better evidence than any conversation I might have captured, that competence ultimately triumphs over politics, and integrity creates more sustainable career advancement than fraud or manipulation. Victoria and Marcus had achieved temporary success through systematic deception, but their careers had ended in criminal conviction and professional disgrace. My career, built on genuine expertise and ethical behavior, had survived their sabotage and flourished in an environment that valued authentic contribution. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply building a better life than the people who tried to destroy your opportunities could ever achieve through their dishonest methods. The scandal that had initially threatened to end my career had instead revealed my true professional value and led to opportunities that exceeded anything I could have achieved by remaining at Sterling Marketing Group. Justice had been served not through dramatic confrontation but through systematic exposure of truth and methodical consequences for fraudulent behavior. 2 years later, I received news that Sterling Marketing Group had been acquired by a larger agency, after never fully recovering from the reputation damage caused by the Victoria and Marcus scandal. Many of my former colleagues, including Helen and Kevin, had found positions elsewhere and were thriving in companies that valued their legitimate contributions. The recording that had started everything remained unplayed. Since that night, I'd captured Marcus and Victoria's private conversation. It existed as proof that truth eventually emerges, even when powerful people believe they can hide their deception indefinitely. But more than evidence of their guilt, it represented my transformation from someone who accepted unfair treatment to someone who refused to tolerate professional injustice. The woman who had recorded that conversation in desperate hope of finding answers had become someone who created her own opportunities based on demonstrated value, rather than waiting for others to recognize her worth. The best stories don't end with villains being punished, though justice was certainly served. They end with heroes discovering they were stronger than they knew, and building futures that exceed their original dreams. The scandal at Sterling Marketing Group had provided exactly that opportunity. Sometimes the worst professional experiences become catalysts for the best career outcomes, if you have the courage to pursue truth and the patience to let competence prove itself over time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.